Go ahead and pull your message notes out. We are in this series, Hard Times, and I'm going to continue it today. I had the thought that I would possibly do a Father's Day specific message, and then I looked at where we were at in the book of Job, and I thought there's not a better message for fathers than this message. And honestly, it's a message for everybody here today, but especially the men. Men that are trying to lead their families, men that are leading in their home, men that are leading in their marriage, men that are leading in the career, workplace. We need wisdom. We need wisdom more than ever before. And so the title of the message is, Where Can Wisdom Be Found? Because the truth is, you are facing situations right now in America, in the world, where it is critical that you have the wisdom to make the decisions that you're going to have to make this week, next week, this year, next year, for the rest of your life. Wisdom to make decisions. And as we've said throughout this series, this is not an easy series as a pastor, because it's not just another message, it's not just another book. There are some of you living hard times. I was speaking to Don in our church at the last service, who's in a wheelchair. For him, he lives in a hard time. It's a condition of his life physically right now. It's not easy to be confined to a wheelchair. And I thought about him a lot when I was putting these messages together, because I didn't want to just, give another message when people are really experiencing pain and suffering right now, when people are really going through hard times. So the book of Job, as we've studied it and looked at it, and if you've missed any of the previous weeks, I highly encourage you to go back and watch online the earlier messages, because Job doesn't give you the answers you want, unfortunately. Job doesn't tell you what you want to hear, but it does tell you what you need to hear. And today we're going to shift a little bit. The first couple weeks of Job are challenging, because it's kind of like life's going to be hard. Life's going to be difficult. Life's going to be tough. So just hold on to Jesus and you'll get through it. And there's a comfort to that, but there's also not a lot of hope in that. It's like, look, it's going to be tough. Hold on to Jesus and then make it to heaven. And that's kind of life according to the book of Job. Today we're going to shift a little bit, and I think it's going to start bringing more of the hope out of this journey as you begin to learn the wisdom you need to deal with the situations of life. You see, the book of Job deals with suffering, deals with pain, deals with hard times with more emotional realism, more intellectual integrity, more practical wisdom than any other piece of literature in the history of the world. And today is kind of the apex of the book, chapter 28. This is long, beautiful poem from Job. It's the artistry of his work. It also reveals his biggest struggle and the biggest insight he comes to on how do I get through what I have to get through with this suffering and with this hard time. And it's all about wisdom. So I'm going to give you two statements to begin the journey today that are kind of the foundation for the message. The first is hard times. Hard times require wisdom to handle it rightly. The reality is, every one of us are going to go through hard times. Every one of us is going to suffer. Every one of us is going to have challenges in our life. The question is, are you going to get it the right way, or are you going to go through it the wrong way? Think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Old Testament. They're thrown into a fiery furnace. Very hard time. Very difficult time. And yet the Bible says they come through the fiery furnace without even the smell of smoke on their clothing. I know a lot of people who survive hard times, but they come out all torn up. They come out smelling like smoke. They come out barely hanging on. The reality is, if you're going to get through hard times, it's going to require wisdom to get through it the right way. And then the second truth is rightly handled. Like, if you go through the hard time the right way, it's going to produce more wisdom in your life. So it's going to take you wisdom to get through the hard times of your life. And if you get through it the right way, it's actually going to produce more wisdom in your life. So we're going to look at 4 things today about wisdom we see in chapter 28 of Job. The first one in your notes is the importance of wisdom. The importance. Wisdom is critically important. You are facing decisions right now. You're going to face decisions this week. You're going to face decisions this year. And it's critically important that you have the wisdom to make that decision. In verses 9 to 14, you can read it in your notes there. Job talks about wisdom as a treasure. And then he ends it in verse 15 when he says, it cannot be bought with the finest gold. Wisdom cannot be bought with the finest gold, nor can its price be weighed out in silver. You see, what Job is saying is what the Bible says over and over and over, is that gold and silver do not compare to the value of wisdom. All of the gold in the world cannot buy wisdom. Over and over, the Bible says wisdom is far more important than anything else in life. Wisdom is more important than all the gold and all the silver. Why? Because wisdom is an understanding for how things work. Wisdom is understanding how the human heart works. Wisdom is understanding how times and seasons work. And I love this phrase that I saw this week in my study. It's understanding so well the complexities of life that you make masterful decisions. Don't you love that phrase, masterful decisions? Wouldn't you like your life to reflect somebody that makes, like you master the art of decisions? Your decisions are masterful. You don't have a lot of decisions that you regret. You don't have a lot of decisions that I wish I would have done it differently, but you've mastered the art of decisions. It's through wisdom. Now, to understand that, you have to understand that wisdom is not less than being moral or having character or integrity. It's more than having character and having integrity. Wisdom is how you handle the 90% of life decisions that have nothing to do with morals and nothing to do with science. Let me explain it like this. Many of the decisions you make, science can give you the answer. Do I drink gasoline? Do I drink water? Science can help you make that decision. Other decisions can be made out of character and morals. Do I lie to my friend? Do I tell the truth to my friend? Well, if I lie to my friend consistently, I'm going to lose that friendship. So values and character and morals can give me that decision, but 90% of decisions that you and I are going to make in our life, it's not based on science and it's not based on morals, it's based on wisdom. Especially when you're going through hard times. When do I cry? When do I grieve? When do I push through? When do I walk away? How do I handle this circumstance? Wisdom. So it's critically important because the majority of the decisions you're going to make in life, you're going to need the wisdom to make that decision. Now, here's the less than hopeful point, number 2, the inaccessibility of wisdom. So wisdom is critically important. You need wisdom to make decisions in your life, yet you can't access it because it's inaccessible. You can't find it. You can't just go look for it. You can't enroll in a college class on wisdom and learn about wisdom. It is inaccessible. And this is hard to understand at first because it's so critically important. So why am I saying that you can't access it? Well, Job says it. It's not just that it's more valuable than silver and gold. Not just that you can take all the silver and gold in the world and you can't buy wisdom with it, but it's inaccessible, unlike silver and gold. You see, we can find silver and gold. Look at verse 9. People assault the flinty rock with their hands, and they lay bare the roots of the mountains. They tunnel through the rock, and their eyes see all its treasures. What is he talking about? Technology, human effort, human achievement. You see, with human effort, we can dig down and we can find silver and gold. With human effort and technology and craftsmanship, we can find jewels and treasure and precious metals buried within the earth. But you can't find wisdom that way. You can't find wisdom with human effort. You can't find wisdom through technology. You can't find wisdom through craftsmanship. Verse 11, they search the sources of the rivers and bring hidden things to light. But where can wisdom be found? That's the question. Where do we find wisdom? Where can wisdom be found? Where does understanding dwell? No mortal, no human being comprehends its worth. And here's the answer. It cannot be found in the land of the living. It's inaccessible. You can't dig for wisdom the way you dig for gold. The deep says, it's not in me. The sea says, it's not with me. In other words, wisdom cannot be found in the empirical realm. You will not discover wisdom through human reason, through science, through understanding, through human effort. Now, why is that a big deal? Let me help you understand the implication of what this means for us. Think about this for a moment. If you and I were not created by God, let's just say for a moment the atheists are right. That the entire life that we know, the universe that we live in, is just a product of random and blind forces and particles that collide together, and all of a sudden we're here. But there's no rhyme or reason, there's no creator, there's no author to life. It's just chance. We're just chance. We just evolved out of a big bang from a long time ago, or whatever the theory is. But we were not created. We just happened. If that's true, now think about this. If that's true, we don't need wisdom to deal with the problems of life. We need science. We don't need faith. We don't need religion. We don't need wisdom. If there's no creator, if there's no author to life, if we're just a product of chance, then all we need is science to figure out the complexities and the problems of life. Now, let me illustrate it like this. If you ask me, is this a good watch? Is this a good watch? And I say, no, it's a terrible watch. It's a terrible watch. Like, this watch is terrible. Just this morning, I tried to hammer a nail with this watch, and it didn't work at all. It could not get the nail in. Then you'd be like, well, you're a fool. Because that's not the purpose of the watch. The watch was not made to hammer nails. The watch was made to tell time. So what do I mean? Before you ask the question, is this a good watch, you first have to answer the question, what was the watch made for? Now, how does that mean to us today? Well, think about it. Before I can answer the question, what is a good human being? What are good human rights? What is good behavior for a human? I have to first answer the question, what was the human made for? What was the purpose of the human? Because I can't deal with the complexities of racism, of war, of prejudice, of injustice, of poverty, of human flourishing by simply trying to figure out, is this a good human or a bad human? Is this a good life or a bad life? Are these good human rights or bad human rights if I don't know the purpose of what a human being was made for? See the problem? If we're here by accident, if there is no God, if there is no creator, if everything about our life is random or by chance, then how do we deal with any of the complexities or problems of this world? Because we can't come to a unified agreement on what is good and what is best. Every culture has a different value system and a different worldview. And so without a God, then yes, science can help us figure out some things. But you don't find wisdom in science. Let me illustrate it like this. I have a neighbor who's an agnostic. And a couple years ago, when there was that terribly tragic school shooting and a bunch of children died in Texas at that school, my neighbor was outraged. He was angry. And he went after me one day. He said, this is why I don't believe in God. If there is a God, how could something like that happen? And I said, wait a second. If you don't believe in God, why are you angry? He said, what do you mean? I said, if there is no God, why are you angry that these children were killed? Because it was wrong. I said, well, why is it wrong? How do you know it's wrong? Well, everyone knows it's wrong. I said, no, not everyone does know it's wrong. There are cultures in the world that have no problem killing children, who wouldn't believe it's wrong at all. So why do you believe it's wrong? I said, what you don't realize is you think like a Christian, you don't even know it. The only reason you believe it's wrong is because you've grown up in a Christian ethic. You've grown up in America, which was built on Christian values and Christian ideology, and built with the understanding that man was created in the image of God, and every man has value and every man has rights. So the only reason because think about it, if there is no God, according to you, then we're under the law of nature. And what is the law of nature? Survival of the fittest. So why would you be angry that this guy killed a bunch of children? You're not angry when a lion eats a lamb or a shark eats a minnow, because that's the law of nature. So you understand why it's so important that we ask the question first, what was man made for? Before we can decide what the purpose is. And again, this highlights the fact that we will not find wisdom in science. Wisdom is not found in the land of the living. So wisdom is critically important. to the 90% of decisions you're going to have to make in life. Yet it's inaccessible. You cannot find wisdom in the land of the living. You will not find wisdom in human reasoning or in scientific discovery. So let's go to the third point. Then what is the source of wisdom? The source of wisdom. Where is wisdom found then, if it cannot be found in the land of the living? Remember the first question we just looked at. Job said, where can wisdom be found? Look at the second question. I want you to look at how he words the second question differently. First question, where can wisdom be found? Second question, verse 20, where then does wisdom come from? If you can't find it, then where does it come from? You see, you cannot find wisdom, but you can receive wisdom. That's the difference. Wisdom can be given to you, but it cannot be found. It can be revealed, but you can't go look for it. So he says, where does understanding dwell? It is hidden from the eyes of every living thing, concealed even from the birds in the sky. Then he looked at wisdom and appraised it. He confirmed it and tested it. And he said to the human race, here's the key, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. So where is wisdom from? The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And to shun evil is understanding. So you will not find wisdom through human reasoning, through science, through enrolling in a class in college. But you can find wisdom through revelation. If God speaks it into our world, if God reveals it to you, then it can be found. But you will not find it in the land of the living. You will find it on revelation from God and God alone. So let me help you understand how God does this. Years ago, Khrushchev, who was the premier of the whole communist bloc of nations, they sent a cosmonaut to outer space. And when the cosmonaut returned, Khrushchev gave this speech in front of the world to the glory of atheism, because he wanted people to celebrate atheism. And here's what he said in this speech. We sent a man to outer space, and there was no God. There was no God. And so C.S. Lewis heard this speech, and C.S. Lewis, the brilliant theologian, thinker from England, he wrote an article in the newspaper in England to kind of respond to Khrushchev's speech. And here's what he said. He goes, if there is a God, then we do not relate to God as if someone who lives on the first floor relates to somebody living on the second floor of a building. So it's not like we're here on earth, the first floor, God's living in the second floor in space, and we relate to God by kind of going up to the second floor and having, no. He goes, we don't relate to God that way any more than Hamlet or Macbeth or Romeo relates to Shakespeare, unless Shakespeare writes something about himself into the play. Now think about it. We all know there's an author to Hamlet. We all know there's an author to Macbeth. We all know there's an author to Romeo, but Romeo doesn't know who the author is unless the author writes something about himself into the story that Romeo can see. Do you see? That's what we have. We have an author who wrote about himself into our story so that we can read it. We have an author who revealed wisdom to us through what is called the Holy Bible. He wrote himself into the story for us to read. And he made the world through this wisdom. He made the world through this logical pattern, this order. Verse 24, he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens. When he established the force of the wind and measured out the waters, water stop here, mountain here, stream here, controlled the rains and seasons. He made a decree for the rain and a path for the thunderstorm. In other words, everything we live in was created by God to have an order. There is a logical order to planet Earth. There's a logical order to times and seasons and how the universe works and how the world works and how, seed time and harvest. You plant seed and you can reap. But then in verse 23, if we go back, it says, God understands the way to it, and he alone knows where it dwells. So God alone can see it all. God by himself, he understands the wisdom of the world that we live in. He alone sees it all. We see in part. Now there's two parts to everything that we have to understand, according to the Bible. Two parts to the universe, two parts to the world that you and I live in, two parts to kind of our life. that you have to understand if you're going to have wisdom to deal with the complexity of life. The first part is what we call the doctrine of creation. There is an order to the world. God created the world to work a certain way. If you plant apple seed into the ground, you don't get oranges back, you get apples back. That's part of the divine order that God created the world that we live in with. You have to understand the doctrine of creation. There's an order to life. But at the same time, Genesis chapter 3 teaches us about the doctrine of the fall, the doctrine of sin, that the same world that was created with an order by God is now fallen and broken because of sin. So there's an order, there's a logic to the world that we live in that ordinarily here's how it works, and there's also a brokenness to the world because of sin. And if you don't understand both of these are true at the same time, you're not going to have the wisdom to deal with hard times in your life. Let me explain it like this. Look at the book of Proverbs for a moment. Think about Proverbs. When you read the book of Proverbs, many people misunderstand it because they think Proverbs is principles for life. If you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, then this will happen. And those are principles. It's like the law of gravity. It works for everybody all of the time. The law of gravity worked in the 1400s. It worked in the 1200s. It works today. It works whether you're rich, poor, black, white, educated, uneducated. The law of gravity does not discriminate. It works for everybody. And so many people look at Proverbs as a book of principles. These are principles. Yet when you get to the end of the book, it starts saying things like the poor work hard for what they have, but oppression takes it all away. Because Proverbs is not principles, it's wisdom. Proverbs deals with the nuance of a created world and a fallen world at the same time. Ordinarily, here's how life works. But we also live in a broken world, so sometimes you do everything right and everything bad happens. See the balance of the book of Proverbs? It's not principles, it's wisdom. Wisdom. Now, there are two kinds of fools, the Bible says, that can't handle difficult, hard times. When they suffer, when they go through hard times, they fall apart. They can't handle it. They don't know how to process it. The first type of fool is what is called a moralistic fool. These are Job's friends. They're moralists. In other words, they fully accept the doctrine of creation, that God has ordered this world to work a certain way, but they reject, they don't understand the doctrine of sin or the doctrine of the fall, the doctrine of brokenness, and so they don't understand when they do everything right, why everything bad happened. And they fall apart. They struggle because, like, look, I prayed, I read my Bible, I served in church every Sunday, I did everything God asked me to do. Why is this bad thing happening to me? They're fools. They're fools because they understand creation, but they don't understand the brokenness of the world that we live in. And then you have relativistic fools. That's what we live in America today, by the way. Everything's relative. I can choose my own gender. I can choose my own pronouns, whatever is true for me. I find my own truth. That's what relativism is. So they accept the doctrine of the fall, that the world's broken and doesn't work the way it's supposed to work, but they reject the doctrine of creation and order, and so they can't figure out why their own truth isn't making them happier. Like, I found my own truth. I'm living my own truth. Why is life not better? Because they understand the world's broken and fallen, but they don't understand there's an order to things. And if you go against the logical order, you're the one that's going to hurt. Without getting political about it and without honestly sharing even what the Bible's opinion about it is, let's just look at the facts of we're in the middle of Pride Month. We've never been, ever, in the history of America, a more inclusive society than we are right now. We've never had more equality than we have right now. So the question is it working? Are people happier? Are they healthier? Is their mental health better? And if you look at the statistics among the LGBT community, what you see is the highest level of depression, highest level of anxiety, highest level of suicide. Because it's this relativistic attitude of I can find my own truth, but I can go against the created order of this world, and somehow they're not going to collide together and cause a collapse in my soul. You see, we have to understand both if we're going to get through the very difficult, hard times of life. So let me illustrate it like this. Relativistic fools deny the doctrine of creation. They deny the doctrine of creation. I'll find my own truth. If I want to drink gasoline instead of water, I'll drink gasoline instead of water, except that there's a created order to your body, and if you put things in your body that aren't supposed to go in your body, it's not going to go well for you. Because we're not just physical beings. We're not just moral beings, but there's a spiritual reality to the world. So if I lie consistently to my friend, I will damage that relationship. Even if it's my own truth, I will damage that relationship. And then moralistic fools, they deny the doctrine of the fall. They don't understand when something bad happens because they were doing everything right. They haven't recognized that, yes, God created this world to operate a certain way, but because of sin, the world is broken and fallen. And this is why hard times will make some people better, sweeter, humbler, kinder, and some people worse. Some people meaner and angrier because they don't know how to handle it. There's two aspects to hard times. There's the pain of hard times, and then there's the shock of hard times. We can't do anything about the pain. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. When you lose somebody you love, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. And I think about a man that was at the 9 o'clock service that I was able to hug. And just a few weeks ago, I sat with him in the hospital as his wife went to be with the Lord. That pain, you can't stop that pain. You can't stop the pain. It's going to hurt. But you can do everything about the shock. And it's the shock that kills you, not the pain. You see, the shock comes from either believing in the creation of order and not the fall, or believing in the doctrine of the fall and not the creation. That's where the shock comes from. Like, why is this happening to me? I did everything right. Or I found my own truth. Why isn't it working? Why isn't it making me happy? It's the shock that crushes us. And wisdom comes from understanding that there's this biblically complex, nuanced approach to understanding that the world we live in has an order. And ordinarily, if you follow the order, it goes well for you. But it's also broken. And there are times where you do everything right and everything goes wrong. So the source of wisdom, having that biblical view, helps you deal with the shock of the hard time. But even if you have the right view, you still have the pain to deal with, don't you? And the pain hurts. Even if you know how to handle the shock and you've got the right view and you're thinking about it clearly, you still got to get through the pain. And the pain's horrible. And that leads me to the fourth point, the secret of wisdom. Because it's the source that helps you deal with the shock, but it's the secret that helps you survive the pain. And the climax of the entire book of Job is verse 28. Let's look at it again. He says to the human race, the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. The fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. To shun evil is understanding. So the question that we have to answer this morning is, what is the fear of the Lord? Now notice to shun evil is morality. To stay away from evil and bad things, that's being a moral person. That's being, that's having character and integrity. But it says here, morality is not enough. Character is not enough. Integrity is not enough. You have to have wisdom. And wisdom doesn't come out of that. Wisdom comes out of the fear of the Lord. And the fear of the Lord is an inward condition of your heart. It's an attitude. So what is fear? Fear is a positive in our life, by the way. When we're afraid of something, typically it's dangerous and it has the ability to cause massive damage and harm in our life. That's why if you're hiking out here in Carlsbad and all of a sudden you see a mountain lion or coyote or bear, fear kicks in to help you not confront that thing in the wrong way because it's not going to go well for you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So fear is healthy. And you can be afraid of something bad like a vicious animal, but you can also be afraid of something good. Because there are things that are good that are so powerful that they can terrify you. Remember C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia? The little girl's talking about Aslan, the mighty roaring lion, the picture of Jesus, and she asked the question, is he safe? He says, oh, no. He's not safe. Incredibly dangerous. Rip you apart. But he's good. And all of you understand this. Let me help you bring this home. How many of you women here today have ever been around a friend or somebody, like at a cafe, anywhere, and there was just another woman there who you believe was far more beautiful than you, and you felt insecure around them? Let's be honest. Any women ever felt incredibly insecure around another woman who you thought was just massively more beautiful than you? Men, how many of you ever been at work or at a business meeting or lunching somewhere, and there was another guy who is far more successful than you, they make a lot more money than you, they drive a nicer car than you, and you felt a little bit insecure because this guy is just a far better man than you because he makes more money and drives a nicer car? How many of you ever felt insecure by another man more successful? Now imagine multiplying that feeling by 100 million. That's what it would be like to be in the presence of God. Think about how perfect God is, how awesome God is, how infinitely good God is, and think about how flawed and sinful we are. Can you imagine being in the presence of that much goodness? It would terrify you. Why? Because it exposes every flaw in your life. It reveals to you how little you are compared to Him. And what makes it scarier than anything is you realize you would have to submit the rest of your life to Him because there's no other response to be in the presence of something that good and that awesome and that powerful and not give up your entire life for Him. And that's scary. And that's why we don't want to encounter God, because I don't want to have to bend my knee to Him. I don't want to have to acknowledge Him as King. I want to be King. I want to run my life. So what is the fear of the Lord? The best definition I can give you in context of what Job is saying to help you in the middle of whatever it is you're going through is this: the fear of the Lord is a scary level of unconditional trust in God's love for you in the midst of hard times. It's this scary level of unconditional trust that God loves me when I can't see Him. God loves me when I can't feel Him. God loves me when I feel like He's abandoned me and I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death and I think I'm going to die here and I think He's left me and betrayed me and I'm all alone. It's this scary level of unconditional trust that He still loves me. Even when I don't see Him, He still loves me. Elizabeth Elliot, unbelievable author. I just saw one of her books yesterday at Hobby Lobby. Incredible woman of God. Her husband was Jim Elliot. He was a famous missionary that went to this remote tribe in the jungles of South America of cannibals. He went there as a missionary and they killed him. And so Elizabeth went back to the tribe a year later and they were shocked. They're like, "We killed your husband. Why did you come? We could kill you." And she said, "Because I forgive you and I loved you and I want to tell you about Jesus." And the entire tribe got saved because of her faith. Incredible woman of God. I mean, the level of forgiveness that she had for this group of people that murdered her husband, strangers. And she went through many hard times in her life and she wrote about it often. And in one of her books, she writes a story about a shepherd in Ireland. She was on vacation in Ireland and she was staying out in this remote area on a kind of farm type thing, and there was a shepherd with the sheep. And it was the annual time of the year where they have to dip the sheep in this chemical bath to kill all the lice and bugs and mosquitoes and prevent them from getting diseases, prevent them from getting sick and unhealthy and dying. And she's watching the process. And the shepherd, very loving guy, really cares about these sheep. And they bring him in one by one into this chemical bath. And she sees the eyes of the sheep confused, not understanding what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the shepherd holds them under the water, holds them in this chemical bath under the liquid. And they're fighting and they're struggling and they don't understand it. And they think the shepherd's killing them. They think the shepherd's trying to destroy them, trying to drown them. And they have no idea what's going on. And they're struggling. And the shepherd is holding them down because of his love. because he wants to protect them. He wants to keep them healthy. He wants to keep them safe. She's watching it, and she says, how often in my life did I feel like the sheep, and I had so much sympathy for the sheep in that moment. And we all do. And so here's what I encourage you to do. If you're a shepherd and you have to do that once a year, and you feel, because they have no idea what's going on, and they just think you're killing them. So this is what you need to do next time. You just need to sit down with the sheep ahead of time and just explain to them what you're doing. Just listen, I'm doing this because I love you. I want you to know that I love you and I care about you, and I want it, and just comfort them. How many of you know the sheep aren't going to be comforted? They're not going to be comforted because they're sheep. No matter how much you explain it to them, they're not going to get it. They're not going to understand. They're not going to comprehend. They just feel like you're killing them. And how many times in our life has it felt like we're being held under the water and we're being crushed and we're drowning and we don't know what's going on, we don't know where God is, and we're struggling? You see, that's how we trust. You see, what C.S. Lewis said about Shakespeare, that Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo, they couldn't know who Shakespeare was unless he wrote about himself in the story. We've got something better. Because the author of our story just didn't write information about himself into our story. He wrote himself as a character in our story through the person of Jesus, who became flesh and blood, who became a human. And the only way to deal with the pain of suffering, the pain of hard times, the only way to truly be able to trust Him, the fear of the Lord, to unconditionally trust Him when we feel like we've been abandoned, is to see Jesus being held under, crying out, my God, why have you forsaken me? You see, He experienced it just like we experience it. He was held under, confused, hurt, crying out to God. And when I see into that, when I see that He went through the darkness for me, I can get through the darkness. Because no matter how painful it is, no matter how much it hurts, I realize it's not because He doesn't love me. It's not because He doesn't care. I may not understand what's happening right now, just like the sheep. But I can have this scary level of fear, of unconditional trust, that as hard and difficult and painful as it is, He loves me. Because I watched Him go through the same thing for me. I watched Him held under the water, being crushed, being killed, so that I could be saved.